Welcome back to the Americas, Part 3, North America. This is the Serpent Mound, located in southern Ohio. This is by the Fort Ancient Culture, around 1070 AD. This is the largest serpent effigy in the world. This is one of many different mounds made by the Native American cultures. This one measures approximately 1,300 feet in length and ranges from 1 to 3 feet in height. The head is at the east, the tail is at the west. This is the head over here. We have the snake coiling around, and then the tail coils into a spiral. Many different native cultures attributed supernatural powers to snakes or reptiles. This was created on a high plateau overlooking the Ohio Brush Creek. The head of the serpent aligns with the summer solstice sunset. The tail points to the winter solstice sunrise. Some different possible explanations of this snake effigy is that the egg or eye shape of the head over here represents the sun, and it's almost like the snake is swallowing the sun or a solar eclipse. Another possible explanation is that the serpent imitates the constellation Draco, with the pole star matching the placement of the first curve in the snake's torso from the head, thus serving as a kind of compass. A third possible explanation is that Halley's Comet appeared in 1066, and perhaps this mound serves to mark this astronomical event. But ultimately, we have no idea why this was created. We just have the fact that it is. Cahokia Mounds. This is near Collinsville, Illinois, which is right outside of St. Louis, Missouri. The current park covers around 2,200 acres, or about 3.5 square miles, and contains 80 mounds. But the ancient city was actually much larger, covering 6 square miles and having 120 earthen mounds. Cahokia was the largest and most influential urban settlement of the Mississippian culture. The original society may have had a population of 10 to 20,000 at its peak, which would have been around 1050 to 1150. So here is one of the mounds there at Cahokia. Mortuary poles and houses. We oftentimes refer to these as totem poles, but that term actually encompasses a lot of different aspects. So these are tall cedar poles that are carved with multiple figures on them. These are made in the northwest coast. Mortuary poles, which this is an example, were made in the 19th century and house coffins of important people at the top. That's what is hidden behind this panel here. There are also freestanding memorial poles that are placed in front of houses to honor deceased chiefs. There are house frontal poles or door posts that are placed against the house front, serving as a doorway, so that would have a flat side. There are interior house posts that support roof beams. All of these are carved from the red cedar logs. They have the figures and inherited crests carved into them. These help identify the pole's owners. Here's a close-up of a Haida mortuary pole. There would be a cavity there at the very top that would hold the burial box. That would have the remains of a chief or high-ranking person placed into it a year after their death. The box would be then hidden from view by the frontal board. These totem poles can tell clan legends, remember events, show the merging of clans, and honor their heritage. They rarely last longer than 100 years. When a totem pole starts to rot, it is taken down and a new one is put up in its place. This is a doorpost that the museum has. We have an owl here at the bottom and a man here at the top. The owl represents wisdom. It is also thought to symbolize the souls of the departed. The human face helps tell stories of the past and of creation. Colors are also very important. Blue is often used to represent water, rivers, and the sky, while white represents the skies, heavens, and purity, as well as death. Yellow reflects sun, light, and happiness. Black represents power. In the late 1800s, most tribes stopped carving these poles. That was because the potlatch ceremony, the ceremony held when the poles were raised, was made illegal in Canada. However, these laws were reversed in 1951. Here is a Tlingit whale house interior. So you can see two of the posts that are used to hold up the house there, as well as this wonderful screen here. Tlingit clan houses were rectangular in shape. They were a post and beam construction, and they typically were about 4 to 6 feet below the surface of the ground, with 1 or 2 step-like platforms descending into the main enclosure. This is a Tlingit blanket, sometimes referred to it as a Chilkat blanket. Only chiefs wore these blankets as ceremonial regalia. They feature stylized bears, eagles, and sea monsters. The creatures are fragmented with eyes, joints, fins, and feathers, delineated with broad black forms. These are very similar to the Chinese tatui. Men created the pattern board and the loom. Women would gather the cedar bark, prepare the yarn, and weave the blanket. The loom consisted of 2 standing poles and a crossbar. You can see in this example that the man has created the design here. The woman is doing the weaving. The loom consists of 2 standing poles and a crossbar. So we can see that poles here and the crossbar here. The warp threads are wool from mountain goats and finely shredded cedar bark that are rolled together. The weft threads are twined across the loom. The women use a finger weaving technique called twining to weave the blanket. Colors of the yarn are typically yellow from tree moss, dark brown or black from hemlock bark, and a blue-green, which is made from soaking copper in urine. So you can see the primary colors on this. Here is the Chilkat blanket that the museum has. Unfortunately, the colors have been faded, but you can still see the design elements, even if you can't see the colors. The design is Hortz the bear. You can see his face here, and then we have parts of him. So we've got paws and other body parts that have been fragmented. Think of it as a native cubism. And here is a woman who is creating one of these currently, and you can see her practicing the finger weaving technique in this photograph. George Catlin, Matatolp, 4 Bears. Matatolp, or 4 Bears, was one of the most respected chiefs of the latter Mandan nation. This depiction of him was created by George Catlin. He was an American painter, author, and traveler who specialized in portraits of Native Americans in the West. Catlin was born in Pennsylvania and started out as a lawyer before turning to art. He published a series of books chronicling his travels among the native peoples of North, Central, and South America. He wanted to record the appearance and customs of America's native peoples. He started in 1830 when he accompanied General William Clark on a diplomatic mission up the Mississippi River. St. Louis actually became his base of operations for several years. He took 5 trips between 1830 and 1836, visiting 50 tribes. 2 years later, he went up the Mississippi River to Fort Union, where he spent several weeks with indigenous people who hadn't been touched by European civilization. He visited 18 tribes, including the Pawnee, Omaha, Ponca, Mandan, Cheyenne, Crow, and Blackfeet. Catlin returned to the East in 1838. He assembled these paintings and artifacts into what he called his Indian Gallery and started delivering public lectures. He was forced to sell his original Indian Gallery because of debts in 1852. This Indian Gallery consisted of 607 paintings. He sold this to industrialist Joseph Harrison and soon started his second collection. This became known as the Cartoon Collection because the works were based on outlines that he drew of the works from the 1830s. Catlin published many books, including Manners, Customs, and Condition of the North American Indians in 1841. This was in 2 volumes with over 300 engravings. 3 years later, he published Catlin's North American Indian Portfolio with 25 different plates. In the 1850s, he traveled through South and Central America. Some of his drawings from this time ended up in the book Indians of the Rocky Mountains and the Andes from 1868. In 1872, Catlin traveled to Washington, D.C. at the invitation of Joseph Henry, the first secretary of the Smithsonian. Until his death later that year in Jersey City, New Jersey, Catlin worked in a studio in the Smithsonian's castle. In 1879, Joseph Harrison's widow donated the original Indian Gallery to the Smithsonian Institution. And here is another of Catlin's pieces. This is of the Mandan tribe. Pomo Hanging Basket. The Pomo tribe is actually divided into 7 groups, each speaking a distinct dialect of the Pomo language. Pomo means people of the red earth. This had to do with the fact that they dug up a red mineral pigment and used it in trade. The original homeland is in the counties of Sonoma, Mendocino, and Lake in northwestern California. By the late 19th century, the Pomo were the only California tribe to produce fully feathered baskets. You can see in this one that we have abalone pendants suspended from short clamshell bead dangles. We also have clamshell beads surrounding the rim. The basket is being suspended from a strap made from clamshell beads. The coiling is called sibu, or 3-rod. The feathering is called tapika. And here's another example. This is the Crow War Shield by Arapoosh, or Sorebelly. Arapoosh, also known as Sorebelly, was a prominent River Crow chief who lived in the first half of the 19th century. As a young man while fasting, he received a shield, which gave him spiritual protection and the power of prophecy. Crow shields derive their powers from the above world, beings from the sky, the sun, the moon, stars, clouds, even birds. And these are very potent figures. When a warrior has a vision that communicates him the particular powers of his shield, he would then depict these powers on the shield itself. This shield is depicting a hero twin named Thrown into the Spring. One day, he disappeared, and his brother kept looking for him, asking several different birds for help. But it was only the cranes who could help him, and ultimately he was able to find Thrown into the Spring and rescue him. This is a beaded dress by Mrs. Minnie Sky Arrow. The dress is made out of buckskin and is beaded on both sides. All the glass beads, it weighs around 7 pounds. Europeans started importing glass beads into America until 1869. Native tribes soon discovered that these enhanced clothing and other objects. Mrs. Minnie Sky Arrow would wear this dress when she gave piano concerts around the country. This is a Southern Arapaho ghost shirt. Ghost shirts are worn by all adherents of the doctrine. During the dance, it was worn as an outside garment, at other times could be worn under ordinary dress. The shape, fringing, and feather adornment were pretty typical from one shirt to the next. However, a lot of variation existed in regards to the painting. Some of the designs are very simple, while others very complex. They oftentimes included the sun, moon, stars, aspects of the mythology, and visions of the trance. It was believed that these shirts were impenetrable to bullets or weapons of any sort. The ghost dance movement began with a vision which was received by Wovoka. Among the peyote, the dance was a peyote world renewal dance, in which the dancers would hold hands as they danced in a circle with a sidestep motion. The ghost dance became a 4-day round dance, where the dancers would hold hands as they danced sunwise or clockwise with a side step. During the dance, leaders, known as prophets, would wave eagle wing fans before the faces of the dancers, or shine mirrors in their faces. This, coupled with singing and dancing, would help induce a trance state among the dancers. And in this state, they would be transported into another realm. They would oftentimes see their departed relatives. This shirt is made out of buckskin, but the ghost dance shirts could also be made out of white muslin. Here are 2 depictions of the ghost dance. Cliff Palace, Mesa Verde. The Anastasi built more than 600 structures into the cliff faces of the Four Corners region. Four Corners region is the southwestern corner of Colorado, northwestern corner of New Mexico, northeastern corner of Arizona, and southeastern corner of Utah. These ancient Puebloans accessed these dwellings with retractable ladders. Only about 125 people lived in Cliff Palace. This is the largest of the Mesa Verde sites. There were about 150 rooms and 20 circular rooms. Due to its location, it was well protected from the elements. These buildings range from 1 to 4 stories. To build these structures, people used stone and mud mortar, along with wood beams. They adapted these to the natural clefts in the cliff face. Prior to this time, the primary buildings were made out of adobe. Families lived in architectural units organized around kivas. Kivas are circular subterranean rooms. Kiva typically had a wood-beamed roof held up by 6 engaged support columns made out of masonry. Other aspects of the kiva include a fire pit or hearth, a ventilation shaft, a deflector, which was a low wall designed to prevent air drawn from the ventilation shaft from reaching the fire directly, and a sapapu, which is a small hole in the floor that is ceremonial in purpose. Connected rooms fanned out around these plazas and creating a housing unit. One room, typically facing under the plaza, contained a hearth. Family members most likely gathered there. Other rooms located off the hearth were most likely storage rooms, with openings just large enough to get your arms through. The cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde were abandoned around 1300. Here you can see some more of the dwellings. Hopi Kachina Dance. This photograph is from 1903. There were 3 different aspects of the Kachina: the supernatural being, Kachina dancers. These are masked members of the community who represent Kachinas at religious ceremonies, what you see here, and Kachina dolls. These are oftentimes given to children. Now, these dolls are meant to be miniature representations of the masked impersonator. So the dolls are meant to represent these dancers here. They are not toys, but they're objects to be treasured and studied. They're part of their religious training. The dolls, once given to a child during the Kachina ceremonies, were taken home and hung on the walls or from the rafters of the house, so that it could be constantly seen by the children, but not played with. There were over 200 original Kachinas. More were invented in the last half of the 19th century. The Kachinas are powerful beings who, if given veneration and respect, could use their magical powers for good. They can bring rainfall, healing, fertility, or protection. The Kachinas had human-like relationships. They could marry and have children. They also represented the spirits of the departed ancestors, spirits of nature, celestial bodies, plants, insects, birds, and animals. This is another photograph of Kachina dancers, and here are some more. These are some Kachina dolls. Traditionally, these would have been carved by the maternal uncles and given to the uninitiated girls at the bean dance, which was the spring bean planting ceremony, or the home dance ceremony in the summer. This is a black-on-black plate. It's an example of Maria Martinez's work. She was born Maria Antonio Montoya in 1887. She lived in the pueblo of San Ildefonso, which is about 20 miles north of Santa Fe, New Mexico. She created her work from clay, which was found locally. She would dig the clay herself. To make the pottery stronger, it had to be mixed with a temper made from sherds of broken pots that had been pounded into a powder, or volcanic ash. She used a coil method, not a wheel, as you can see in this photograph. The dried vessel needed to be scraped, sanded, smoothed, then covered with a slip. The slip was then polished by rubbing with a smooth stone. That slip was then covered with designs, painted with an iron wrench solution. This was either pulverized iron ore or a reduction of wild plants called guaco. It was then fired in high temperature. The high temperature was achieved by adding manure to the fire. Her husband Julian, her son Adam, and his wife Santana, and her son Apovida all helped. Maria is well known for her matte black design over a polished black. This was achieved by smothering the fire with powdered manure. This removed the oxygen while retaining the heat, and the pot was blackened. This actually resulted in a pot that was less hard and not entirely watertight, but these were increasingly purchased as art objects. She would use rain clouds, bird feathers, rows of planted corn, and rivers as design elements. She and her husband Julian produced their first black-on-black pottery around 1919. While the museum has many of her black-on-black pottery, this is a rare piece of her early work, pre-1919, where she was still using the traditional designs and colors. This is a Navajo eye dazzler blanket. The Pueblo tribes grew cotton to weave blankets and garments. They used a distinctive Pueblo loom. The Spanish first introduced sheep to the Southwest. In the early 1700s, there are records showing that the Navajo kept sheep and used their wool to weave blankets. The blankets were woven in several different sizes, but in three main forms. The serape, which is a shoulder blanket that is woven longer than wide. The saddle blanket, single form, a squarish small weave, or in double saddle blanket form to be folded in half under the saddle for extra cushioning. Or the chief's blanket form. This is a shoulder blanket woven on the loom wider than it is long. The eye dazzler blankets get its name because, well, they dazzle the eye. Here are a couple other examples.